What's up, YouTube? I wanted to make this video real quick because I've been looking into a situation in China that's quite disturbing to me for a couple of reasons. And you may have heard of this, you may be familiar, you may not be. I want to make sure that everyone knows about this and then is aware of potentially how to make a difference and end some really crazy activities and crazy suffering that's going on in the far west of China. It's a region called Xinjiang, and many minorities live there. It's Muslim minorities. And as you may know, the dominant group of people in China is the Han people, and they are not Muslim. And there's been a lot of racism and discrimination apparently over the years and even over the decades, um, directed toward a few of those Muslim groups from the majority Han society in that particular area in Xinjiang. But over the last year and a half, it's bumped up a whole nother level because you have freaking concentration camps that are being constructed. And apparently these camps, these concentration camps, are housing these Muslim minority Chinese. And the government claims that, well, first they denied it. They said these camps don't exist. And they said, oh, yeah, we're building these schools because we need to re-educate the Muslims to accord with our society. They train them to essentially worship the Communist Party as opposed to Allah. And well, first of all, I should tell you who's being taken to these camps, because based on reports that have been coming out recently, it's literally anybody in Xinjiang province who shows an affinity or a love for Islam. So people, men with, Muslim style beards, they're being rounded up. You got people that are entering mosques, because there are plenty of mosques there because it is traditionally a Muslim area, but they're more so like tourist destinations now, because every time you go into a mosque to worship, according to what I've been reading, people at the front desk write your name down, they take a note, and if you go to that mosque one too many times, then clearly you're too Islamic for the government's liking, and you're liable to end up at one of these camps. So it's all about re-education and bringing the population in line with the Communist Party, with President Xi, and really trying to, it's been referred to as ethnic cleansing or religious cleansing, in the sense that there's not a lot of love for Muslims right now. The same could be said about my country, the U.S. We've got a lot of problems with discrimination against Muslims, but China, it's like order of magnitude more of an issue there. It's quite sad. So, in addition to adults being deported and taken to these re-education camps or schools that are concentration camps, where there's been reports of torture, there's been, the government says that it's like school, and it's all about teaching people about communism, and it's so much more than that. It's such a negative experience. People have reported being forced to stand against a wall for very long periods of time. People have reported legit torture, all due to their faith. Now, in addition to those adults, there are apparently, and this is even maybe more upsetting, camps for kids. So children are taken to similar institutions based on some of these reports that have been coming out that I encourage you to read for yourself and which I'll link to, are taken to their own education centers. And the government refers to them as schools, but these kids are at these schools for weeks, months on end, often separated from their, well, always separated from their parents because it's an institution for minors. And, you know, we had plenty of discussion about separating kids from their parents here in the US recently. And it's really still going on in Xinjiang at this point. And, the question is, what can we do about this? Because especially those of us who come from the Jewish community, we know all too well how these concentration camps turn out and where they go. And what starts out as something that doesn't necessarily involve killing or genocide, it can go there. Some of these pictures, the images, satellite images that were reported recently by the BBC, you can see even from last year to this year how they've expanded. And I'll link to that article as well. It's quite troubling how experts have, estimated 11,000 people could be sardined into this one, or more if it's really cramped, one camp. And by the way, I haven't even mentioned numbers. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of Muslim, of ethnic minorities in Xinjiang province, maybe even upwards of 1 million people who have been often separated from their families and taken into these camps. And the government there, the Chinese government, the Communist Party, is doing all sorts of strange things, including sending civilians into the homes of, forcibly, into the homes of some of these Muslim families. I think it's something like for 5 days every month or every 2 months, a family is living with one of these, I don't know what you even would call them, communist representatives, and supposedly they're teaching the families about, how great the Communist Party is and how awful the Muslim faith is, and teaching them how to write and speak Mandarin, because that's a big part of this, is the language. And that's also a big part of what supposedly these schools, which are really concentration camps, were established purportedly to educate these Muslims on the Mandarin language and Chinese script, Chinese language and whatnot. And in general, and I had heard it in regards to China in general, but with a surveillance state, such an Orwellian scenario where you have security cameras everywhere, the communists have the ability to track people and surveil them. And apparently that's especially happening in regards to these ethnic minorities in the far west of China. Because, like I said, it's a long-standing tension there, unfortunately, and there's been violence. And, much like here, where after September 11th, many Americans and segments of the U.S. government were not particularly Muslim friendly. They were not exactly espousing the equality that so many of us Americans prize. And there's still a lot of bigotry, and perhaps now more so than ever with Donald Trump, with the Muslim travel ban and what have you, firing people up to, hate and discriminate. But like I said, if you think what's going on in this country is bad, I encourage you to look into the horrors that are apparent in Xinjiang province in Western China, because we're talking about people being separated from their families, often tortured, often there for long periods of time. Apparently, when some of this stuff came to light last year in 2017, people reported having been in the concentration camps for a month or two. But now I'm reading reports of people whose relatives have been there for a year. I mean, can you imagine? And often what precipitates this is some of these people traveling abroad and then returning. Like I said, people are getting rounded up for going to a mosque. People are getting rounded up for having a Muslim-style beard. People are getting rounded up if they eat halal or if they, aren't drinking alcohol. I mean, it's crazy the extent to which the surveillance state, I worry about it here, but in China, they've mastered the art of surveilling, spying, keeping tabs on their civilians. But anyway, the point is that one report I read was about a woman whose mom had visited her. I forget where she lived, but it was abroad, and then the mother returned to China, and then the woman didn't hear from her mom, so she called her mom, and her mom told her that she was being taken away. And the mom said, "Never call me again," to her daughter. She said, "Never call me again," which who knows who told her to say that, but that brought her to tears, and that was very moving for me. So I'm just rambling a bit because, I really just found out about this, and it's quite upsetting, and I encourage you to look into this for yourself, and I'll link to a couple articles that I found informative. And, I want to let everyone know too, there's several organizations out there, fortunately, that are concerned with this issue, and in particular concerned with the main Muslim ethnic group in this region known as the Uyghurs or the Uyghurs. Okay, so there's several groups affiliated with that group of people. One of them is the Uyghur American Association. And I appreciate that they have a lot of information on their site in regards to this crisis. In particular, they've got a template of a letter that I've already submitted to both of my senators, and I will be sending it to my newly elected member of Congress once she arrives in D.C. You may be aware that Florida Senator Marco Rubio conducted a hearing earlier this year in regards to the deportations and the camps and their surveillance. And he has, and many other congresspeople have appealed to the Secretary of State in regards to putting sanctions on some of the Communist Party leaders. And also, I believe, some of the American companies that have been manufacturing some of these cameras and surveillance equipment. I mean, we shouldn't let these American companies off the hook either. So anyway, thank you for watching. Please check out the links that I have or will be adding under the video, and encourage you to subscribe because we'll be talking about this a lot more.